I was never quite sure why Tom didn't like me. I was a fourth grade student moving from Baltimore, Maryland to rural North Carolina in the middle of the school year in 1968. And it was odd to me that this kid who didn't know me at all just suddenly took a dislike to me. And whenever we went out on the playground, Tom was trying to pick a fight with me. I was a little guy, and I didn't really know what to do. But there was another guy there who was even bigger than Tom. His name was Bill Ray. And Bill was a big, burly, oversized fourth grader. In fact, by the time he was in the sixth grade, Bill was already shaving every morning. Burly, huge, everybody respected him. So since I couldn't beat Tom Baker up or respond to any threats he made against me, I did the next best thing. I found a big friend in Bill Ray. And Bill Ray became my friend and remained my friend all the way through high school. I think we all need a big friend sometimes like that. You know, if you're going to get into a fight, it's good to have a warrior on your side and not a pacifist. Whenever Tom would threaten me in the playground, I would just go hang out near Bill, and my problems were over. That's why I think I've always bristled a little bit when I've seen portrayals of Jesus, not as somebody who is strong or powerful, but as somebody who is weak. You know, you've seen the photographs of him. He has lily white skin. He has smooth facial features and flowing brown hair, and he's wearing a white tunic with a blue sash, and sometimes even holding a gentle little lamb in his arms like this. We all know the pictures of that Jesus that we've seen. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. And yes, Jesus was meek and mild and gentle, but not the way the world thinks of him sometimes. In fact, the word meek doesn't mean somebody who has no sword, but it means somebody who has a sword, but chooses to keep it in its sheath. That's what meek means. So my favorite parable, in light of this, that shows this characteristic of Jesus more clearly, is the one in Matthew chapter 20. And I'm going to read that in a second. But I like it because it tells me something about Jesus' character and something about his opponent's character, the teachers of the law. And the parable allows me to draw strength and courage from his example in the face of opposition. In Matthew chapter 20, we have this parable. It's also found in Luke and Mark as well. It's called the parable of the tenants. And it goes like this. He went on to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard, rented it to some farmers, and went away for a long time. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. He sent another servant, but that one also they beat, treated shamefully, and sent away empty-handed. He sent still a third, and they wounded him and threw him out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my son, whom I love. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they talked the matter over. "This is the heir," they said. "Let's kill him, and then the inheritance will be ours." So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, "God forbid." Jesus looked directly at them and asked, "Then what is the meaning of that which is written? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed." The teachers of the law and chief priests looked for a way to arrest him immediately because they knew he had spoken this parable against them. But they were afraid of the people. You know, in the parable that Jesus has told here, note that they recognized themselves in the parable. A man planted a vineyard. God plants the seeds of the gospel in the nation of Israel. And he goes away for a long time. The tenants are those that were to keep the revelation of God through the Mosaic law in the Jewish nation, to keep it pure, to be a light to the nations, to show them what it's like when a nation devotes itself entirely to God. And when they stray, he sends them servants, prophets, judges. And what do the tenants do in the history of Israel? It's easy to see that they kill the prophets. They treat them shamefully. They send them away empty-handed. Then he sends his son. And this is where it gets very interesting, because the tenants, these chief priests, recognize who Jesus is saying he is. And yet it does not change their attitude. These were not just misled men. These were not people that didn't understand. These were genuinely evil, power-mad officials. It's not the first time that Jesus had encountered them. And I think it's instructive to look at one previous example of many that we could look at where Jesus faces off against them. It's in Matthew chapter 12, and Jesus is on his way to a synagogue, and there's a man there with a shriveled hand. And it says that the chief priests were looking for a reason to bring charges against him. So they asked Jesus, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And Jesus says, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit, won't you take hold of it and lift it out, even if it's on the Sabbath? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? And therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And then he says to the man, stretch out your hand. He's not doing this in a corner. He wants the man to stretch his hand out so everybody can see it. He's making a point. He recognizes what they're trying to set him up for. And he takes the challenge. And it says he stretched it out and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other one. And look at the reaction of the Pharisees. It says the Pharisees went out and plotted how to kill Jesus. They didn't just want to ruin his reputation in public. They were not interested in sullying his reputation. They go out and plan how to kill him. Now that's a pretty severe reaction. And so it's more significant by the time of this parable, because Jesus knew that they were out to get him, and he knew the extent to which they were willing to go. But he doesn't back down. He doesn't hide. He doesn't try to appease them. He doesn't try to make waves. He actually tells a parable with them in the audience against them. Message sent and message received. They understood what Jesus was saying against them. Yet he doesn't back down. Being meek does not mean not having a sword. It means having a sword, but keeping it in your sheath. And that's the kind of meek that Jesus was. He is the big friend that all of us need. Helps us to stand against the antagonists of God. Helps us take a stand when it's necessary. It helps me to understand what it means to be meek without being weak. And it helps me to learn how to be like him. Jesus is our big friend, and he's always looking out for the little people.